This is the Brotherhood. Real talk, real growth, real connections for anyone ready to own their truth and heal their wounds. Whether you identify as a man, woman, or somewhere in between, this is a space to get honest, be vulnerable, and build strength together. Welcome back. I'm your host, Raul, and today we're talking about something that a lot of men feel but don't always have the language for. We're talking about the difference between being needed and being at peace. Because for a lot of us men, we were taught how to be useful, how to provide, how to fix, how to show up for everyone else, but we were never really taught how to just be with ourselves. Now, I want to be clear about something. I am speaking about men in this episode because that's the space I know and the experience I can speak on directly. But this isn't exclusive to men. There are women who will hear this and see themselves in it too. Women who have learned to hold everything together, to be the strong one, to always be needed, always be useful. So while I'm speaking to men, the truth in this conversation can land for anybody who's lost themselves in responsibility. Let me ask you something. Not what you do for others, not what you're responsible for, not what you've been assigned to carry. What actually brings you joy? Let me say that one more time, right? What makes you happy? Not what you do for other people, not what you're responsible for, not what you've been assigned to carry. What actually brings you joy? See, this question is different for a lot of people because a lot of us don't actually have an answer that belongs only to us. I'll give you a perfect example. I'll use myself, right? And this is because I've looked outside. I've worked and looked outside of my responsibilities and my roles, the roles that I play. If you guys haven't heard the episode that I did about roles, right? Who are you without the roles? Go check it out and listen to it, right? Because all of these things tie in together, right? And the episode after that as well. So the question is, right? Do you know what brings you joy outside of those things? So back to the example of using myself, right? So for a very long time, I had this thing where being responsible is who I am. Being the provider, the one that fixes, the one that protects, the one that this, the one that. And because it was tied into my identity, I didn't know how to separate what actually brought me joy and what these roles and these responsibilities was. It's separate. Obviously, through time, through working on certain areas in your life, you start to notice these experiences, and it all starts with questioning. Okay, questioning is what allows us to see and think differently. That is what sparks the interest of knowing certain things or certain areas in your life about yourself. And I learned that through Angie, right? Because she's the one that started questioning everything when she went through her awakening, right? I also went through my own, but there's layers and layers in this type of work. It's not just once. It's not surface for sure, right? But questioning is where these things are sparked up for you to understand yourself and to be honest with yourself. So for me, right, one thing that I can tell you that I enjoy, myself, is when I play sports, especially basketball or softball, right? I say softball because, I'm 40 years young and I haven't played baseball in a long time, which I still feel physically and health-wise I can play baseball. But anyways, those things bring me joy. Right? They bring me joy. Okay. For some, it could be dancing. Right? For some, it could be drawing, artwork. For some, it could be speaking like I am right now doing a podcast. I also enjoy this. Okay. I enjoy this. I enjoy guiding, mentoring, leading, speaking, sharing my thoughts, right? Coaching one on one. I enjoy that also, right? And this is what allows me to take my mind off of responsibilities, off of the roles that I play. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't necessarily love the roles that I play. It doesn't mean that I don't care about those roles. It doesn't mean that I don't care about the responsibilities that comes with those roles. That's not what this is. This is why it's important to ask the question and be honest. So, what makes you happy without those things? Like, what actually brings you joy? Do you know? See, joy will be doing that thing and not worrying about anything else because you are in tune with you, what you enjoy, what you love to do. Okay. Now, you might be doing it already, but then you're always constantly thinking about your responsibilities and the roles you play. You're not separating the two. See, most times when we separate it, we automatically fall into this thing where we think we're thinking wrong about it, or there is something wrong with me if I'm thinking that. No, there isn't. Because it doesn't mean you don't care about your responsibilities. It doesn't mean that you don't care about the roles that you play in this lifetime in the human experience. It doesn't mean none of that. This is just something that you love to do for you and for you only. Choosing you at this moment to enjoy that happiness, that thing that brings you joy. I hope that makes sense, right? So let's get into something that I like to call like core ideas. Identities built on usefulness, right? So here are the conditions, right? Man learned to provide, fix, protect, perform. Value becomes tied to usefulness. Being needed becomes the identity, right? We don't just become providers. We start believing that providing is who we are. I just gave you a perfect example. I've never separated the things that brings me joy from the responsibilities that I have and the roles that I play. I can go play softball, have fun in the moment, but there's a rush to getting back to my responsibilities, to the roles I play. There's this sense of not being fully in the present moment of what you enjoy because of responsibilities and the roles you play. Right? These are all things that we grow up believing it is what like for me, those things come from my dad, from my father, right? My father was raised a certain way. Then my father raised me and my brothers a certain way. He raised us to the best of his ability. He raised us with what he knew, right? But here's the beauty. At some point when you become an adult, certain events can happen where you start questioning all these things. You start to see like, man, it doesn't have to be that way, you know? And even then, there can be a situation that comes up where you get basically tested to see if you're actually on the path of what you've learned so far. There's things that will come up just to test that, right? And they don't have to be a negative thing. These things happen for you to actually see, right? That to actually see what you are questioning about life, especially in the areas of your life, if you're actually staying true to you, right? And there's even more deeper things you can go into that when you start to choose yourself, right? So the internal confusion, right? If I'm not needed, am I still valuable? For most men, ooh, that is a big one. If I'm not solving problems, who am I? If I'm not showing up for someone else, what am I doing? And over time, we start confusing being useful with being fulfilled. Okay, now again, like I mentioned earlier, I am speaking to men because it's the experience that I know. But this does not mean that women can be in the same shoes, in the same position, right? Because here, see, I saw a video that Angie posted, and it makes a lot of sense, right? These are the things that I've learned just watching her do her thing, right? And it's like we've been so focused in what is in between our legs that it does not allow us to see outside of that. This is as a collective, this is everybody, right? Because men have a penis, we are supposed to be X, Y, and Z. Because women have a vagina, they are supposed to be X, Y, and Z. That's the point of her video, which makes total fucking sense, right? So, and then if you look at these things, where these things come from? From the same thing, from the same idea of because I have a penis, I'm supposed to be this way. Because she has a vagina, she's supposed to be this way. This is the roles we're supposed to play. These are the responsibilities. Separate them because these are the responsibilities you're supposed to have depending on what you have in between your legs. And it shouldn't be that way. And I think more and more things like this is being shared, the more and more we wake up as a collective to understand that that's not how the world should be or consider should to be, right? It's a constant battle. You have women judging men, men judging women, all because of that. All because of looking at what's in between the person's legs. Literally, right? So let's continue. Right? The emotional cost, what gets lost, right? Disconnection from personal joy, like I mentioned, right? We're in the moment of something that you like, that you love to do, that brings you joy. You're not focused and present in that moment because you're disconnected from it because you're thinking about all the responsibilities and the roles that you play, right? Difficulty answering simple emotional questions. Hence the question I just asked, what brings you joy, right? Rest feels uncomfortable. This is a big one. Because if you rest for too long, most of the times we feel like we ain't doing nothing. And it's not about your creativity. It's not about your 9 to 5. It's not about your business. This has to do with you, right? Because when you're done for the day, let's say you're someone that has a 9 to 5 or you're an entrepreneur, when you're done for your day, what do? You go right into the role that you play. You go right into the responsibility because it's uncomfortable to rest. See, society also says you can't rest. A man is out all day working because, again, he's the man that has a penis, so he has to be the one that goes out working all day. He comes home. He tries to rest. He's uncomfortable, but then he has the woman who says, yo, this. I've been home all day taking care of the kids, cooking, cleaning, etc., because that's what society says the woman who has a vagina has to do. Right? And then the woman expresses herself on this way. The man is saying, yo, all you're doing is complaining, blah, 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 blah. You guys get my point. That's not the world we live in. That is incorrect, guys. That's beliefs that we grew up believing how it should be. So when you get to a point in your life and you start questioning these things, where I'm at in my life now, still questioning a lot of things, right? You start to see the BS in a lot of areas in life and in your own life, right? Because you can't control anybody else. You can only control yourself. Right? But you start to see these things. Question everything, people. Everything. So life feels like a constant responsibility, not alignment. So you can be successful, respected, and still feel disconnected from yourself. Not because something is wrong with your life, but because you've never been taught how to exist outside of responsibility. Okay, I know this is going to resonate with a lot of people, majority of the people that listen to this. It's going to resonate, and for those of you who listen to every single episode that I drop, who is constantly, telling me how much they appreciate the episode that I dropped, so real, so raw. Thank you for this. I needed to hear this. Just imagine who else needs to hear this. Just imagine who else feels this way. See, if I felt that way before and I'm sharing that experience and it's still an ongoing working process because there's layers to it, and you're listening to it now and you're looking into it now and you're also now questioning, just imagine the people who have been feeling this way and has not come across people like myself, people like Angie and others who share things like this. So share. You hear my podcast, share it. Share it with a friend, share it with a family member. Right? Most likely they need to hear something like this. If you feel this way, I'm just saying, if you feel this way, imagine someone else who else could talk about it, share it. Why not? That's what I'm doing. I've been given the gift of having a voice. So have you. Right? I'm just using mine. Finally. I'm using my voice finally. Right? I have older episodes where I talk about that. Finally using my voice. How I hid it for so long because of what others would say. Right? Use yours as well. Use your experiences to share with people. We need more people to share things like this. We need more people to start questioning. The world becomes better when we start agreeing as a collective. Question everything. You'll see. You will see what the other side is of it. See, it may start off a little dark, but trust me, there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And a lot of people don't want to face that darkness first to get to that light. There's a lot of people that are in that dark tunnel and have seen the light, but it's performative. Let that sink in, what I just said. It's performative. There's another darkness that gets you to the life, and it's your life, yours, without forming, without having this facade or this persona that you've built, this identity that people see through Instagram, through TikTok, through YouTube. It's facing yourself. That dark tunnel, that mirror, that is the tough one. Not when you perform because you started and you came from poverty and you started a business and you changed your lifestyle and you took care of your family and now you're making a certain amount of money. Now you can buy a car. Now you can buy a house. Now you look this way on social media. Nah, it's performative, baby. I'm talking about you. You. Look in the mirror. I'm talking about you. When you start questioning life, that dark tunnel, when it starts off, that one is the one I'm talking about. But trust me, there's a light at the end of that tunnel also. The performative one is 3D. The performative one is the one that we see from the majority of people. I'm talking about the one that I've seen, that I am still working towards. I'm not in the dark tunnel anymore. I'm towards the light. But there's even more after you achieve or reach that light. There's more. And that's the beauty of life. That's the beauty of experiencing it. You're meant to evolve. How can you evolve if you're not questioning life? Answer that question. When you hear this, answer, how can you evolve if you're not questioning life? If you're just going about life regularly? That was me. I was going about life regularly. I never questioned my life. Never. That's why I will always be grateful. And I will always shout out Angie, because she went through that she had the guts to accept her awakening process and share with the world. Because a lot of people start and they let it go because they either they get scared, they don't want to continue on. It is what it is. But seeing her and then things happening in our lives for me to also see mine, if I didn't see that experience, I wouldn't even be here to even go through the same experience, right? In different ways, of course. But that's the dark tunnel. Seeing the end of the light of that dark tunnel is the one I'm talking about. You, not the performative one, not the one you performing. Mm-mm. Because then that's just the roles that you still play. I'm talking about getting deep. Anyways, life tests you, right? And what I've learned is that there's layers, like I mentioned, there's layers to this. This is not just one time. The moment that you feel you got it, boom, here comes it again. Let's test, right? And it's just learning the lesson because it repeats itself if you don't learn it. It will continue to repeat itself if you don't learn it. You can move on, get another job, meet other friends, meet another partner. If you didn't learn the lesson and whatever it is that was happening, that will come back. That lesson that you have not learned is going to come back in the new relationship, in the new friendship, in the new job. It just is. It's going to continue to come up, right? So life will bring you back to a certain situation just to see whether you actually learned the lessons you thought you've learned, right? So awareness isn't the same as embodiment. You can understand something and still default to the old pattern. You don't just learn lessons once. Life will test up again and again and again and again and again. See, the important thing is here, and people confuse it a lot, is embodiment. You being aware, which is the start, that is great. See, you have how you grew up. You have how you grew up. Certain things in your life will come up that has to do with childhood trauma, right? You weren't aware. But once you become aware, that's the first step. Embodying who you are becoming after you're aware of what's going on, after the questioning, after doing the work, the embodiment of that is what will show. Embodiment. Being aware is one thing. Doing the work after you're aware is another thing. But embodying who you are meant to become is the key. Okay? So, boundaries versus guilt. You start choosing yourself more. You set boundaries. You become less available emotionally or physically, then someone you care about goes through something difficult. This is an example of once you start to choose yourself, once you start to set boundaries, right? This is what I talk about. This is what I mean by life testing you. Something, either you go through something or somebody you're close to goes through something. Automatically an old pattern will come up. You drop everything. You become the fixer again. And then in that moment, you have to ask yourself, am I showing up from peace or am I abandoning myself again? Okay, so once you start to understand what brings you joy outside of your responsibilities, outside of the roles you play, you start to choose yourself. Now you start setting boundaries because you're choosing yourself. Now you start doing things that you love and bring you joy without thinking about responsibilities, without thinking about those roles, right? And then something happens. That is the test, my friends. That is the test, guys. That is the test. So automatically the old pattern comes back up where you're just like, yo, now I gotta do everything again. Now I gotta be the one that fixes. Now I gotta this, and now I gotta do that, and now I gotta. So you have to ask yourself in that moment, when that comes up, what are you gonna do different to break that pattern, right? So you can still show up, but not let it be from pressure. Let it be from peace, love, understanding that you can care for others, but also having the boundary of knowing that you're not going to abandon yourself again either. Okay? So, at some point, right, You stop overgiving. You try to balance emotional energy. Then emotional pressure returns, right? Then the old pattern again. Over explain, over fix, over responsibility. Helping isn't the issue. Losing yourself within it is. And this comes up a lot in relationship dynamics, right? Where you're choosing you, right? And again, like I mentioned, it doesn't mean that you don't care about the responsibilities. It doesn't mean that you don't care about the roles, right? What I mean by roles is being a father, husband. For women is being a wife, being a mom, right? Those are the biggest roles that we play. If you're not a mom, you play a role of an executive at a business, right? You are still, everybody's a daughter, everybody's a mother because you have a father, because you have, sorry, everybody's a daughter, a son, right? You may be a brother, a sister. Those are roles, right? But in a relationship dynamic, when you start to choose yourself, it necessarily doesn't mean you don't care about your roles and that you don't care about the responsibilities you share in your roles. This is not that. This is just understanding that when you decide to choose you, okay, when you decide to choose you, something can happen with the old patterns come back up, and it's just a test. It's just a test. And all you have to understand is that there is nothing wrong with caring. There is nothing wrong with helping as long as you don't lose yourself in it. Okay? So, core shifts, right? What is a core shift, right? In this whole message, right? Peace isn't when nobody needs you. Peace is when you no longer abandon yourself to be needed. Okay? Again, you've heard me say it over and over. It's not about what you do, what you bring to the table. It's abandoning yourself to do those things. Okay? And again, this comes from how we were brought up, those beliefs, right? That come from our parents, and they raised us knowing what they knew. But then we are, especially my generation, we are in a place right now where we have been exposed to a lot more things as adults, where we can raise our kids differently, where we break those generational chains and patterns on how to raise our kids because we were raised a certain way. And I see it still, where people are raising their kids a certain way just because of how they were raised, and maybe they just weren't exposed to what we're exposed to, what I'm exposed to, right? Or maybe they are and they just don't care about that. They're going to continue to just do it the way that they were taught. But the world is not heading that way. Your kids are going to teach you a fucking lesson, and you might be ignoring it, but they're here to teach us like like big time, right? So parenting for myself now is different from how I was raised. And yeah, I can say this obviously because I've seen it even for Angie as well, right? And I've seen friends who have raised their kids differently from when they were raised, also being exposed to maybe not as deep as something as what I know. Not that makes me better, but for them is something of a feeling like, I don't need to raise my kids like this. This doesn't feel right to me. I'm gonna raise them this way, right? And then if you think about it, the way you were raised and molded you, right? But then if you also think about this, you were meant to go through that process anyways, right? So, turning point. Okay. The turning point question is, so the real question becomes, am I living my life or am I just being useful in it? Okay. Am I living my life or am I just being useful in it? For a very long time for me, I felt like if I wasn't doing these things, I wasn't playing these roles, and if I wasn't being responsible, I was not living my life. That I was not. Right. And I can tell you that I am living my life because I've learned how to separate the two. but it doesn't mean that I'm perfect at it. What I love about it now is that I can catch myself and work at it. And again, like I said, it's layers. There's layers to this. It's not just one time deal, right? So, as always, I always have a listener's challenge for the audience. And a lot of times people do share with me if they answered it. If you don't share it, which you don't have to, but it would be great if you heard the episode and you answer the questions yourself for yourself. Write them down, right? Go into a quiet place to be with yourself and ask the questions, right? So now I want to leave you with these questions. This is the listener's challenge, right? Be honest with yourself and answer these questions, not aloud, but within yourself, right? I always say write them down because at some point you might want to go back to where you wrote them down just to see, right? So let's say you start to make those changes when you answer these questions, and if you just leave it to your mind, you don't have any proof of going back to see the progress or to observe what you're catching, that pattern, right? Or record yourself while you do it, while you answer it, right? But writing it down is what works for me, right? So questions. What makes me happy when nobody else is involved? When was the last time I did something just for me without it benefiting someone else? Do I feel uncomfortable when I'm not needed? Have I built my identity around being the person everyone depends on? Where in my life am I confusing responsibility with identity? Am I currently choosing peace or am I choosing to be needed? Take your time answering these questions. Don't rush. Okay? Don't rush. So, because the truth is, most of us aren't lost. We're just over identifying the roles that we play. And also, these roles that we were taught and see and believe are what makes us, when the reality is doesn't, right? So before I leave you guys, okay, I genuinely love sharing these episodes because they're experiences, right? Majority are well, not majority, but all of them are experiences that I've had. So I never come on this platform just to talk shit. No. It's life experiences that takes and requires working on and layers of working on and being honest with yourself and also being open to learn in the process of all of it, because we can get caught up. We can get caught up with what society has told us should be, should look, and what is. But again, my friends, we are meant to question. And how can you evolve if you're not questioning? If you're not questioning, you're not evolving. So, thank you for tuning with me. Thank you for tuning in with me today. And as always, remember, come for the truth, stay for the brotherhood. I finally made it this far and I'm not looking back.